So, in Monica Coleman's book, Making a Way Out of No Way, the author is making sense of what it means to make a way out of no way in the current context of globalization, religious pluralism, and sexual diversity. The current events of the time of publication, 2008, are that stock market crash, the recession, and Obama's election. Um, so what I found when I was deciding what the thesis was is that she was basically saying that a postmodern womanist theology is a normative process of becoming that strives towards creative transformation in accordance with God's vision by working on a future of wholeness, justice, equality, discipleship, inclusion, and a better quality of life for the Black community. Black women make a way out of no way for salvation with and for the Black community and beyond that. So in chapter 1, Coleman begins with a brief overview of womanism and its origins, and she introduces the main womanist theologians that she makes mention to throughout the whole book, such as Jacqueline Grant, Kelly Brown Douglas, Dolores S. Williams, Joanna Marie Terrell, and Karen Baker Fletcher, as well as their ideas. She describes making a way out of no way as the expression that acknowledges God's presence and ability to provide options that don't appear to exist in the experiences of the past. The experiences of making a way out of no way being God's presentation of unforeseen possibilities, human agency, the goal of justice, survival, and quality life, and the challenge the existing order, which we're a fan of. In chapter 2, she talks about process theology and its relationship with free will. Process theology she kind of describes as our experiences in the world influencing who we are and what we do, and then go on to influence those around us. And then she brings up Albert Whitehead's idea of evil and how he says that free will causes a mix of loss and suffering, but really evil is a product of free will, and from that evil brings the losses and suffering, oftentimes. So in chapter 3, she talks about creative transformation, and she starts off with human interrelatedness. And if we abandon this idea, we'll experience different manifestations of evil. And so it's like racism, sexism, and things like that. So she then also brings up process theology because she's about to explain creative transformation, and how the process of change can be destructive or creative, and salvation is an example of a creative mode of change. Creative transformation is how we work with God to implement God's ideas in the world, or God's ideals in the world. It provides a model of how to live and draws from the womanist focus of ministry of Jesus, and the pursuit of justice and the action of teaching and healing. All that. She talks about John Cobb Jr., and the main points were his logos, the Word of God. Being the function is to introduce a tension between what has been and what might be, and how we can continuously challenge the social norms with that. And then the idea of Christ, not as Jesus Christ the person, but the concept of Christ and what it means, being the incarnation of God in the world. He says Christ is a change that occurs in humanity, in art, in philosophy, everywhere. So then how creative transformation and making a way out of no way works together with teaching and healing. So salvation requires the saving activities of God, and those acts of welcoming was dining with sinners, healing lepers, and teaching women. And then that is healing the fragmented society of the time. And so creative transformation requires you to be contextual, you know what that means. And then the activity of healing, restoring wholeness and community where there's exclusion, corruption, individualism, fragmentation, and brokenness. And then how the community is a vehicle and goal for salvation for Black people. And so salvation occurs in the community, and it brings it together, so it needs the entire community to be there or be square. Chapter 4 was about ancestors and learning from the past and how not to repeat the past. The process of rememory to keep the past alive. Um, and then honoring the past lets us make a way out of no way. The fundamental level of the past is embodied by the present. It was beautiful to read about that, actually. And she challenges the reader to think about the difference between remembering the past and honoring the past. Then the chapter 5 was kind of like a conclusion that touched on each point made, and then it made mention of Yoruba religions and different ways that happens in different cultures and countries, like in the Caribbean, in Africa, and then America. And then GSN Ministries as a Christ-centered, inclusive community of faith committed to love and justice for all of God's creations. But she was a huge fan of that. So what was good about this was making a way out of no way really describe the role and goals of Black women as a strong nurturers who were to survive with what is given. The title suggests, making a way out of no way suggests there hasn't been a way paved for Black women, so she's got to do what she's got to do to make it happen for herself, because otherwise nobody else was going to do it. It's just like the running joke on Twitter is like, Black women's like, F it, I'll do it myself, since nobody else is going to do it. And then the similarities between creative transformation and making a way out of no way, which I relate straight with just Black women, but I'll talk about that a little bit. But how they both challenge the status quo, leads us to the future, challenges us as we experience it, change that transforms humanity and the wider world, challenge oppressive forces of society, and then how it's contextual. Many of the challenges we face that differently privileged group don't face causes us to almost beg for people to consider what we're going through, and look at the past, look at the context. And so when she was talking about the rememory, is a direct response to disremembering, which I related to the idea of trauma. When people go through traumatic things, they try to push it off or push it away to act like it didn't happen so that they don't have to think about it. But if we do that on a bigger scale as a community trying to disremember trauma that happened in its own past, it rots out a person when somebody does that, and so it rotted in the Black community. And so different activities that Karen Baker Fletcher said would be storytelling, because it keeps societal, spiritual, and cultural past at the forefront of our mind. But that's just like going to therapy. Going to therapy, you storytell about your whole life. And so I thought that was an interesting correlation, or in my own mind. What I thought was not good was how she was talking about the connection between postmodern womanist theology and creative transformation. How making a way out of no way, she made a statement, making a way out of no way is not just particular to the lives of Black women. And that's great. But I think that since the theology is made, it doesn't have to be all-encompassing, because the reason why it was made was because the general theology and religious experience was not all-encompassing, that it doesn't have to be all-encompassing for Black women. And so I think I want the postmodern womanist theology to be selfish about caring for who it's for before we can care for the world and making the world a better place. So I just kind of want to challenge it that way. I thought it was nice, and since it's for humanity, Jesus couldn't be selfish about who he helped, and I think in this way, maybe postmodern womanist theology can. Just for its own sake, before it helps all, it needs to help itself.